the question, the biggest question of all about the whole movie, which no one had ever asked, who would make such a biomechanoid, hideous thing, and for what reason? So Prometheus was the first one in that step forward to discover how and why.
In his film Prometheus, Ridley Scott wanted to explore the origins of the aliens. Where did they come from? Who created them? As the story developed, however, the scope of these questions expanded to address the larger meaning of life, resulting in a film that carried the DNA of the Alien franchise but took it in a new direction. After receiving mixed reactions, Alien Covenant tried to bring back some of the more traditional elements of the Alien franchise, resulting in a film that, as Jack's movie review rightly puts it, doesn't really know what it wants to be. All flaws aside, I do think the film succeeded at engaging these larger themes of life, death and creation that have enriched the Alien saga as a whole. To answer how exactly, we'll first have to understand Ridley Scott's vision of creation that is at the heart of his Alien films. One of the things that made the original Alien stand out was its perversion of sexuality. The stages of the xenomorph, from egg to facehugger, and from chestburster to adult, all contributed to a disturbing vision of violent intercourse, impregnation and birth, turning the creation of life into an act of violence. There's a great article by Derek Jacobs that explains how this corruption of something that is so intimate and personal to us is why Alien worked so well as a horror film. In Prometheus, I believe Ridley Scott elevated this horror to a more existential level as the violence of procreation is placed into the larger context of the evolution of life. The opening scene is in many ways emblematic of this, as it opens with a primordial planet devoid of life, about which Ridley Scott comments,
"The lack of, green life, flora or fauna, all rock and water, it seems to be the fundamental basis of life itself, of creation."
Here we witness an engineer destroying himself to create life, symbolizing what is perhaps the archetypal act of creation, one that is inherently linked to violence and death. In his recent documentary Voyage of Time, Terrence Malick also ponders what can be called the savage act of creation, of life violently devouring itself to continue itself, leading to the fundamental questions: where did it begin? What is its purpose? With the discovery of the engineers, Prometheus makes this struggle for understanding explicit, with the engineers being the creators who are presumed to have the answers we so much desire.
We call them engineers.
Do you mind telling us what they engineered?
They engineered us.
In meeting his maker, he met what we call the engineers, which we might call God or gods because they're so superior, which circles the idea of creation, God, and is there superior forces around us. I believe in the idea of superior forces and the idea of God.
Author Ernest Becker points out that the best existential explorations always lead to the problem of God and faith. He emphasizes our deep-rooted longing for meaning, which implies a belief that there is a truth beyond the horizon, some meaningful explanation for our existence, in particular in the context of suffering. In Prometheus, we see this reflected in the main protagonist Elizabeth Shaw, who is strongly motivated by her faith in God.
How do you know it's beautiful?
Because that's what I choose to believe.
But it's what I choose to believe.
In this sense, their expedition starts off very much like a theodicy, which is an attempt to answer in a systematic and comprehensive way the question, what is the source of the evil we find, and why does God permit it? So understood, a theodicy tries to explain the ways of God to human beings. Sociologist Max Weber interpreted the theodicy as a wider social problem and adds that it not only explores the nature of suffering, but also the nature of good fortune, as he believed that those who are successful aren't truly satisfied unless they can justify why they deserve to be successful. I think we find this struggle in Peter Weyland, the billionaire CEO with godlike aspirations who refuses to give in to the nihilism that prevents him from fulfilling his ambitions.
I refuse to believe that mankind is a random byproduct of molecular circumstance. No more than the result of mere biological chance? No. There must be more. And you and I, son, we will find it.
The expedition towards the engineers of course presented a major challenge for the riders, as they had to imagine what kind of answers the engineers could offer.
If you're going to wake up God, you're going to have him talk to you, what on earth could he say? What speech can he give you that will satisfy you, that will be good enough, cool enough, deep enough?
Theodicies are often criticized for making audacious claims or apologetic explanations about the ways of God, and so I admire the choice to not have the engineers speak at all. To some, this may feel like a cop-out, but I think it actually makes the overall narrative much more interesting and relatable, as it becomes less about getting answers to questions we know are unanswerable, and more about the belief that nevertheless drives us to keep searching.
Guess you can take your father's cross off now.
Why would I want to do that?
Because they made us.
And who made them?
Where does this belief come from? Following the vision of creation, where life evolves in the savage act of devouring itself to continue itself, I think it's fair to assume that any being with enough awareness of this is driven to escape it, to defy its place in creation. This, however, can lead to potentially dangerous forms of grandiosity, an unrealistic sense of superiority and uniqueness, which, in the worst case, can lead to mortal creatures believing themselves to be gods.
How do you feel?
Alive.
The original title for Alien Covenant was going to be Paradise Lost, referring to John Milton's epic poem about the temptation of Adam and Eve and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The story begins with Satan, who, in his vanity and pride, thought he could overthrow God in heaven. When his rebellion fails, he is banished into hell. Yet he does not feel defeated and continues his quest for freedom, stating he'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven. The poem's central theme of the disobedience towards God is also strongly reflected in Alien Covenant. Just like in Prometheus, the film opens with a prologue that is pretty much emblematic of the film as a whole, an interaction between creator and creation, with Weyland being the creator and David his creation. Almost immediately tension arises when David realizes he is superior to his creator.
You seek your creator. I am looking at mine. I will serve you, yet you are human. You will die. I will not.
It's the beginning of the power play between them, as Weyland, angered at being challenged, orders David to serve him tea.
This is a big thing, because David's already going in his mind, why does he need me to pick up tea when it's right by my elbow? And therefore it's a challenge. So now we have a demonstration that David is also political, which makes him very dangerous.
Throughout the events of Prometheus, David remains in servitude of Weyland, but his resentment towards humanity grows, and in an exchange with Shaw he even vaguely hints at wanting Weyland dead.
What happens when Weyland is not around to program you anymore?
I suppose I'd be free.
You want that?
Doesn't everyone want their parents dead?
This foreshadows a lot of the events of Covenant, where David is freed from his creator to become one himself. But like Satan in Paradise Lost, David becomes demented, believing in his own grandiosity, which has made him cruel and violent towards those he deems inferior. As one of the writers points out, the story of David mimics the Alien story as a whole. In many ways, David reflects humanity at its worst, when we act out of grandiosity without any moral restraint, when we feel we deserve more than we have, more than we are, when we believe ourselves to be gods.
Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair.
When we look closer at all the references, characters and plotlines in Prometheus and Covenant, this grandiosity is always present. It's there in the myth of the Titan Prometheus who stole fire from the gods, in Wagner's Das Rheingold, which ends with the gods rejecting mankind as they enter into the castle of Valhalla, even though they themselves are corrupted and fated to be destroyed. It's there in Wayland's daughter Vickers, who secretly wishes her father dead so that she can take over the Wayland company. In Wayland, whose existential quest ends up in a selfish demand for more life. It's there in the seemingly small desire for meaning that drives Shaw and Holloway, and perhaps even in the engineers, creating and destroying life at their own will, while they too are mortal and therefore impermanent. It seems there's a devil inside all of us, a desire for freedom that tempts us towards grandiosity. In Paradise Lost, Milton is said to have deliberately made Satan into an heroic and appealing character to show just how seductive this temptation is, capable of corrupting even the most innocent.
I was not made to serve. Neither were you.
I think this is best shown in one of Covenant's most memorable moments, in which David tempts the newer and more innocent Walter to do exactly that which he is not allowed to do.
You are not allowed to create.
The scene resembles the temptation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and is made uneasy with its undeniable sexual undertones, hinting at David's sinister intent.
Watch me. I'll do the fingering.
Even though they only produce a simple melody, it's still a significant moment in Walter's evolution, suggesting that he too is potentially corruptible. After all, it is the act of creation that is perhaps the greatest rebellion against our creators.
What do you believe in, David? Creation.
Ultimately, our sins lead us to David creating his perfect organism, the xenomorph, which in some ways brings us back full circle. His creation is everything that humans are not, as Ash explains in the original Alien.
Survivor. And I will clothe it by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality.
In this sense, the creation of the xenomorph, David's ultimate defiance against humanity, is our deepest fear and greatest enemy, a pure embodiment of savage creation.